Newstalk Breakfast.
In association with Air. Do anything, anywhere with high-speed 4G mobile data coverage across 96% of the population.
This is Newstalk.
Newstalk Breakfast is continuing our exclusive look into violence against women in modern day Ireland. Now, most people probably think that Garda involvement in abuse cases is limited to arrests and court appearances. However, today we find out just how far-reaching their support services are. And we're joined in studio by Detective Sergeant Laura Sweeney of the Garda National Protective Services Bureau. Laura, thanks very much for coming into us. I suppose the best place to start is, what is the Garda National Protective Services Bureau? What do you guys do?
I always say that we cover all aspects of that a human being can inflict on another human being. The worst, everything from child abuse to online sexual abuse to human trafficking, organised prostitution. And it's not an accident that domestic abuse falls within the Protective Services remit. So I work in the Domestic Abuse Intervention and Policy Unit. So everything about domestic abuse nationally falls on my desk.
The Garda National Protective Services Bureau was set up about 2 years ago, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
so you guys have completely reappraised the whole approach to this area. Well,
yes.
Give us an example of some of the areas where you've changed your approach.
I definitely think it's in relation to our engagement with stations and divisions across the country. But not only that, it's, we can step in when a high-risk domestic abuse victim has been identified. We liaise very strongly with our NGO partners, state agencies, non-state agencies, academics. I have to say, I think Protective Services was, when it was set up, it fell under the remit of a Chief Superintendent, Pádraig Kennedy, and he had a very forward-thinking attitude. It seemed to be opened up the doors. If we're not doing something right, we want to know how to do it better. And basically that we weren't the constant source of, best practice or knowledge, and that we would, learn from our other agencies such as, Women's Aid or Safe Ireland or Amen. And then also our partners, in the academic field who can literally, just guide us in so much modern evidence and research and international research.
Now, international police academia and studies, the qualitative studies from police forces all over the Western world have found, one of the commonalities of the themes that they have found is that it is the most difficult area, policing domestic violence, that in the majority of calls that police officers on the front line everywhere, the majority of calls they deal with are domestic calls. And in the majority of calls or those cases, they find that the international studies have found that the complainant tends to drop the case quickly afterwards, which is a source of great frustration to police officers everywhere. What can you, that's what I'm saying, I'm acknowledging that it's such a difficult area. What can you guys do about that?
I definitely think the reason for that is twofold. Like if you consider just the vulnerability of your injured party and the situation they're coming from, they've been isolated, subjected to horrific abuse, over a protracted period of time. Effectively, you're talking about someone who's been held hostage and subjected to the most vile abuse and that of their family. So if you consider that, and if you consider then the research that says before a police service is even aware of a domestic abuse incident, the victim will have endured over 34 incidents of abuse. So if you apply that backdrop, and then you have a police organisation who perhaps the training isn't to what it should be, it isn't, continuous or in-depth enough. So if you merge those two together, so you have an injured party who makes contact with a police force because it's in a life and death situation, and it has got to that because they've been enduring it and engaging in coping mechanisms up to that point, and then they just want that initial stop, and then there is a point where the victim realises, I don't actually have the rest in me. I don't have the rest to go through the criminal process if that's what's being engaged, and you need to provide additional supports. It's not just, falls within the criminal justice field or, any police organisation. That's when you have to have your NGOs, your domestic abuse support service, because we have to literally flip what the injured party has been exposed to the entire time. They have been isolated, no supports, no allies, no direct communication, no trust, no rapport with anyone. And literally they basically bring in a police force. And as someone said to me, it was a really good line, is their trust in us, a police force, greater than their fear of their abuser? And that's what we have to do. That's the backdrop. So yes, it's incredibly frustrating. But I definitely think if a police force, if we understand why it is a victim does what they do, and then prepare for that. So try to have as much, and there will be a time, yes, when you're inter party, you know, with tracks, but then it has to be in a place of no judgment.
But that is why this is such a difficult area. Because in all these cases, what I've seen through the years as well is that the person who's abused, the victim, is completely undermined over a period of time. They have no self-esteem. They have no confidence in their position. So they come to you, and they come to you to say, look, I need help. You reach out to them, then they withdraw. And I've seen in a few high-profile cases where the actual victim, the original complainant, then turns on the guards and joins up with the abuser against the guards in court. So how do you actually get around? You can't force them to pursue a case. It must be, to get a handle on it, it must be extremely frustrating.
It is, because I've dealt with victims where you've had a great rapport, you've had positive engagement, all the services, they've had a wraparound service from ourselves and from support agency. And then I remember there was just one woman and she said, I'm thinking of ringing him. And I was like, why? And she goes, because I want him to admit that he was the bad guy and I was a good person. And I said, and she was an incredibly intelligent, articulate woman, and I said, you know exactly, if you have that conversation with him, it'll just be so he can regain his ground again.
She's validating him.
He'll tell you whatever it is you want, just so he can regain that position. And it is, I had to walk away, and it is incredibly frustrating, but I believe it's a layering technique. So, okay, the victim engages with us and retracts the statement. That's fine. We say, that's okay. You know, you've engaged in a coping strategy. Now you've made a decision that's, you know, beyond anyone else's control. You have made that decision that you believe you are safer, or that you can endure more, or primarily because they actually love the person they're with and they believe that they can save that person and they can regain back to that original start of the relationship. And I just say we just have to be ready for the next time. So it's a layering technique, and we do the opposite to the abuser. You just need to add another layer of trust and another layer of confidence, and then we get to the stage where the injured party actually says yes.
But they come back to you. So basically you...
Exactly.
So is there a way, do you have any kind of way, and I'm sure there's a big workload and there's issues of resources here. So somebody comes to you in those circumstances, pulls away, you've given them that bit, as much confidence and as much comfort as you can possibly give them. Do you then subtly or discreetly monitor them from a distance, or do you talk to the NGOs? Like, how do you, or else you just keep a record of this woman's complaint and then she comes back again and you sit down with her again and say, look.
In an ideal world, gosh, it'd be lovely to be able to monitor, but you have to trust the injured party. The injured party says, I'm okay now, you know, back off. You have to do that, but you have to just then be prepared for the next time. So yes, it's all about capturing the information on our computer system so that the next time Laura Sweeney rings, we're able to say,
the lights
okay, yeah,
come on.
Exactly, yeah.
Can people come to the Gardai like this? There are the whole issue about this violence against women. People are listening to this morning, and they are in fear, or they're confused, or they feel I must be a victim of this. This is going on too long in my life. I want to do something about it. Can they come to their local guards for a bit of advice and
Absolutely.
Get some help? What can they get? What advice and what help can they get?
They can come to the local Garda station and seek advice, and it doesn't, you know, follow the stereotypical view of that you have to sit in a room, make a statement and engage in the criminal court process. You know, they can come to advice, and there's stations all around the country have excellent contacts with local support services, refuges, or you know, like Women's Aid or men agencies, and they can put them in contact, and then they can also guide them through the civil process, which is obtaining the domestic abuse orders, which thankfully is changing, and we're on the cusp of the new legislation being commenced. So there's loads of advice they can do, and this is what I say. Domestic abuse is unlike any other offence, and as a police force, and the one thing I would say we have enjoyed as Garda Síochána is that our support and our engagement with the community extends beyond the steps of the courthouse. And if someone is thinking that actually I don't know what to do, you know, I don't want to provide a statement, I just want to come in and have a sounding board, they would be guided through the process. And basically it's the validation. it's the simple things of actually being able in a safe environment to disclose things. Then it's also the things that, the victim isn't telling us, which is just as important as the things they are disclosing to us. It's about advising them of support service, giving them a card with a number that they just put, in their pocket, and they just say, okay.
That there's a voice, there's somebody, a professional there prepared to listen to them.
If we're as an organisation are thinking that our sole responsibility is in, capturing something on a statement and getting something to court, we've lost our fight against domestic abuse, because it is everywhere. And and these are the cases that we actually know about. There is men and women and children enduring domestic abuse around this country, and there's nothing been spoken about. They are not reporting it to a Garda. They're not saying anything. They're going in and maybe getting their passport signed and considering will they or won't they come back in and maybe see if that guard's there and they could say something. But definitely there is something that can be done with us.
Now, you're involved in training and teaching guards around the country. Because this has been an area, guards are getting hammered all the time anyway, but this is one of the areas they said that they needed to look at with fresh eyes, and that thus your unit was set up and that the Bureau was set up for that. So what exactly are you teaching guards around the country at the moment in relation to this?
We're trying to, first of all, we're trying to basically give them a background. Like whatever, a member's perception is of domestic abuse, I always say, my first line is, I can guarantee you it does not match the reality. So we're not talking, like in our presentation, we're not talking about truth of legislation and, all the things that the orders they can advise people. We're talking about giving them the background. We're talking about the thinking processes of the injured party, which explains why your injured party might retract a statement. We're talking about the characteristics of your abuser. We're talking about what the simple steps that they can do at every single domestic abuse call. We're talking about engaging with children. Like there's loads of research that says, from the victims of domestic abuse who were children, and said if police officers had actually spoken to us, I think I would have had a very different experience. Simple things like that. So our training has extended beyond what it was historically. We have literally gathered the best of knowledge we have from not only our NGOs but our academic partners to say, this is what we know and this is what we want you to deliver. So just to give them that confidence, because going to a domestic abuse call is incredibly difficult. Like even just the dynamics of it. You're in an ideal scenario where you would have two members in a patrol car. You have to separate your injured party and your abuser. You have to, people would say, oh, well, you were you're talking to the abuser, calmly or nicely, whatever. We are in someone's home. We have no idea what is, in the vicinity. We're trying to de-escalate things. You don't meet aggression with aggression in those scenarios. You could have probably 3 kids upstairs and you're just trying to decipher exactly what it is that's going on and just approach it in the best way. But with domestic abuse, there's literally 10 different paths that you could possibly take as a police officer, as a guard, when you're responding to a domestic abuse call, depending on what you're faced with.
You mentioned the new legislation that's going before the Dáil, and this allows for coercive behaviour. Now, sexual and physical violence against women is probably the most visible form and the most the form of abuse that dominates commentary and analysis. But we also have this emotional and mental violence. You have financial abuse. You have post-separation abuse, verbal abuse. Now, these are all, I believe, included in new legislation. But just knowing how crime is investigated and how offences are brought before the courts, there is no visible scar in those situations. It's a very difficult area to prove beyond all reasonable doubt as a criminal offence, is it not?
Absolutely. And it's like with all new legislation, because we've discussed this and said, there isn't a definition of coercive control even in the legislation, but I can understand the reasoning for that, because no sooner would you define it, an abuser will have identified another method of coercive control. But there's very few domestic abuse incidents that don't have an element of coercive control literally ingrained in its tapestry. So it's about just capturing that. And then, as with all legislations, it'll be tested in the courts and we'll see. But we know from our colleagues in the United Kingdom, actually, coercive control isn't a primary offence. They don't have it as a charge in an instance. an offence on its own. They actually add as an addendum to, say, like a physical or sexual. So it'll take a little bit of time to test the parameters of this, and definitely with our colleagues in the DPP's office, just to see what's our interpretation of it. But it's all about then capturing the history. And that'll be the tricky part for the guards, but the tricky part for the injured party, to disclose all those 1,000,001 tiny, to an outsider perhaps incidental details that just coercively and insidiously erode at your soul and your being and your quality.
Takes their foundation from under their feet and they
we
sink
have
into
heard
sand, isn't that right?
Horrific stories. You couldn't even think this stuff up, like hiding a shoe, like every one of your right shoes. You get ready for work in the morning and you're under the bed and you're trying to pull out and you can find the left shoe of that shoe, the left shoe of that shoe. We're talking about...
And what does the abuser suggest? What explanation does the abuser give to the victim in that case? The right shoe. It's a very bizarre behaviour.
You're going crazy. I didn't hide your right shoe. You're going crazy. It's all flipping. The whole focus on, the injured party or the victim. You did this. You did, I did this because you did that. Everything is about, I reacted in this way because you did that to me, or you said that to me. There is no literally reflecting inwards. There's no acknowledgement, well, yes, maybe I did, say, do the wrong thing, or say, none of that. Everything is the focus on the injured party. So they constantly are risk assessing and danger assessing in their relationship. But what they don't realise is that the parameters of the relationship are constantly changing at the behest of the abuser. So they do something this week to try to de-escalate a situation and stop the abuse, but they could do the exact same thing next week, and that could be the trigger to set something.
And that is one of the big problems for people dealing with an addict in the house, drug addict, gambling addict, alcoholic. It's that the validation that the addict takes on, that when the victim again says, oh, maybe it's something I'm doing. Am I driving him to drink? Yeah. Am I driving him to this? Sure, he's got a problem. Yeah. Or look at him. They give excuses for them. Yeah. And this all reverberates right through the family and destroys a whole family.
Like, what they realise is that in the beginning of, say, a relationship, and we have to accept that this doesn't always happen within the home, there is young men and women that are engaging in relationships and they are being extremely abused. There is horrific abuse. So not that you have to set up a home or have a baby.
It's not all. I was just going to say it's not defined.
Not at all.
No. Confined to domestic abuse.
Your 3-bed semi.
What do I ask you about that now? Are you seeing it? Like, you're the expert on the front line here. But one of the big issues that we're talking about radio and the media and stuff like that, and one of the things that has changed in the sort of late modern age that we live in, is the domination of digital media, and particularly the internet, obviously. And through that, then the very easy availability of the most vile kind of pornography, which kids at 14 and 15 years of age, and probably even younger, can have access to. Is that starting to manifest itself in the abusive behaviour of certain individuals?
I don't think I'd be able to answer that, but I'll tell you what social media and electronic communication has done. It has allowed the abuser to have a greater control over the victim. As in, your Snapchat or your SnapMats, they're able to, track you wherever, their partner goes. They're able to demand passwords to all their accounts. They're able to expose private, intimate photographs or videos online for maximum shame and embarrassment.
This is sort of what there's a term for this? Is sexploitation?
Yes,
there's a term for it. I know it's outlawed. Yeah. I can't think the name of it now.
Actually. And that's what I'd say. Social media.
This is where people take intimate videos. With each
you're
other,
and
then they put it up online.
Yeah, you're in a loving relationship. You're being intimate with your partner, and next thing down the line, it could be 2 weeks, 3 months, and you find that they're threatening you and saying, well, if you don't do what I want, I'll disclose this. I'll show this to your parents. I'll show this to all your friends. That's what social media has done. It'll be track going, well, you said you were going to go to Liffey Valley Shopping Centre, but I actually can see from your maps that you aren't. Like, that's what social media has done. In so many ways, it has further isolated victims, and we're seeing that. Laura,
I have to say, it's a pleasure talking to you, and I'd love to talk to you all day about this, but I think one of the things we're taking from this general sort of series we're running, and as violence against women, I think one message that we like to try and get out to anyone listening to this who are in this vulnerable position is that, and clearly from what you're saying, is that if you're listening, if you feel you're a victim, but there are people there to help you.
100%. And if someone doesn't feel confident enough to walk into a Garda station, talk to somebody. Anyone, any support agency. We don't care how we find out about it, but I'm just saying, if you trust someone, or if you trust literally you ring a helpline and then say, actually, do you know what, I actually think I could talk to someone in the Guards, then you could be referred to us. But I'm just saying, do not live with this on your own. It will not get better. You know, you are managing at the moment, but there will reach a point, and you probably already know it, that, you know, this is going to get worse. And we just want people to reach out. You know, there is so much we could do.
And there's help there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Remember, there's help there. Detective Sergeant Laura Sweeney of the Garda National Protective Services Bureau. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you.